Charles, I wanted to have you on tonight, not to talk about wins and losses, signings, dissecting the game, on and on and on. I wanted to talk about once and for all the situation that we saw Orlando and TFC and the refs once again butchering a call, and the ramifications that I believe are going to happen if this continues on in the next few weeks. Not only here in MLS with supporters and clubs, on and on, but I've gotten contact from agents, assistant coaches in Italy and in Portugal that they will not send their good players here for this reason and this reason only. Where do we go from here, Charles?
Whew. Well, that's a big one. it's an issue that's hard to get arms around. It's a complex problem, so I don't think there's going to be any simple solutions to it. And I'm honestly, I can't say that there's a magic bullet out there. We face the same shortcomings and flaws with our refereeing that we do, with the quality of play in MLS or the depth of the soccer culture here. We're still playing catch up against the more established football nations, and I think across the world, we're also experiencing here at home what everyone around the world sees, which is as the game grows faster, more technical, more athletic. You're asking human beings who are at a fundamentally different place physically from the players that they're trying to regulate. They're trying to keep up with something that's constantly accelerating. And I think it's almost reminiscent of where tennis was a few years ago, when you saw that the strength and muscularity of the players was so overwhelming that the game itself began to almost sort of turn into a blur. I think there's a lot that goes into this, but I don't think we're going to be able to solve this really anytime soon, unfortunately.
I think we can, Charles, and I'd love to debate you on this. I really think we can, because look, I got to give credit to Don Garber, the commissioner of MLS, for doing a lot of good things: expansion, bringing over some quality, well-known players here, facilities, on and on. I think they've done an unbelievable job. Their players are wonderful ambassadors for the game in North America, but they've dropped the ball in this department. And for me, it's simple. You can go to Spain, Italy, Portugal, on and on, Germany. You can go to South America, to Uruguay, to Chile, and you can bring in refs here, and you'd be surprised the amount of money they would be making compared to the guys that are making the money here now. Because if you want to be taken seriously, then you need to do this, I believe, and I don't think it's that far-fetched to do this, Charles.
Well, so let's go back to what you mentioned before, which is the idea that the very dangerous idea that MLS is too physical, too rough, too dangerous for elite players, for skilled players. And that definitely has its roots in the past. There's a factual basis for that in terms of what a sort of agricultural league this was for a long time. And I think the league's leaders became very aware of it. They made it a real priority. But there's fundamental limits to what they can do versus what the federation's responsibilities are here. And here in the U.S., the federation is responsible for refereeing, and same as it is in every other nation around the world. Up in Canada, the CSA is involved, whether we like it or not. There's still, in the U.S. at least, there's still only a handful. I want to say around a half a dozen of full-time referees who've been entrusted with full-time salary, all the full-time accoutrements that come from sort of trying to make these guys the focus. And you're still dealing with, there's a little bit of a weekend warrior aspect to it. And but they've invested there. They've invested in pro and creating pro, in trying to create a focus on it. And they've gone back and they're doing retroactive video decisions. There's a 5-member committee that's looking over video every single week of the MLS season, trying to catch stuff that the referees on the field miss. And that in and of itself gets them, is very controversial. There's people that hate that idea. Alexi Lalas and others are very prominent detractors of this idea of refereeing by video, refereeing after the fact. They think that once there's a strong line of thinking out there that if you don't catch it during the game, you can't go back afterwards.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, Charles. But look, when a player gets suspended, he gets a card, or he's suspended for a few games, everyone knows about it. Why don't we know when a ref has been put on the shelf for 3, 4, 5 games because of a horrible call that we saw in Orlando versus TFC? Why? That's number one for me. And number two for me is also this. Look, this excuse that, they've done so much to try and help with pro, they've thrown in money in development, on and on, yada, yada, yada. Look, that's all good. But guys' jobs are on the lines. Coaches' jobs are on the lines. There's livelihoods. There's big money at stake here. And these refs are making not a 50-50 hard call that you and I might have difficulty making. They're making a brutal decision on a brutal time of the game to cost people points, Charles.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in a sense, I think we should welcome this a problem. It's a good problem to have because it means that there is increased speed, intensity, increased quality to the matches, and increased significance for a long time. And still, we hear the knock on MLS. Right? The MLS system doesn't reward, doesn't value the day-to-day games, right? Because there's so many playoff spots. Because we don't have the same intensity because of the playoff system, right, as you'd have over in Europe, where every single game counts, and it's 38 games, and that's all you've got. You've got to be perfect week in, week out. I think that certainly I'm not trying to defend the mistakes. There are many mistakes made. I've been shocked by some of the mistakes that have been made this year, but I've also been shocked by the mistakes that were made in Copa America. I've been shocked by some of the poor refereeing I've seen in the Euros this summer. We're asking a lot of these players, and I have a big problem if you go up a few levels here. FIFA has been explicitly and persistently anti-technology over and over again. I don't know if it starts and ends with Sepp Blatter. I don't know if it's an organizational culture thing. But they invested millions of dollars in developing goal line technology, then they refused to use it, refused to make it the law of the land. There's so many things we could do to help these referees out. We're still asking 4 or 5 human beings to make decisions that we even cuss and discuss for hours watching the video over and over, and we're asking these guys to make that decision in real time. Right. I think in many ways we're asking the impossible from our referees, especially when you consider the directives, right? The directives. God forbid, every big tournament, we have directives coming out. Well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and we're going to crack down on this, and we're going to crack down on that. And I think it's just like a player that has to be thinking about what he's doing in the run of play is probably not going to be performing at his best. A referee that's having to think about what's going to happen, what he's supposed to be doing, what the new directive is, I don't think that referee is going to perform to the best of his or her ability.
And I hear all this, and I respect everything you say, Charles. I truly do. But I for years and years, whether it's my 2 sons at the grassroots level, semi-pro or pro, when I worked as an assistant general manager back in the Canadian Soccer League, it's never changed still today in 2016. Look, without refs, there's no games. We need more younger people getting involved to become refs, so we need to support them. I agree with that. But where I've not yet heard anyone in all these years past in that referee department, a head ref, come out and say, I messed up, I screwed up, I need to go back and hone my skills better, study, learn where I made my mistake, and then I'll get back out there. We never hear this from these guys. And they just continue on to ruin games, ruin people's, for the most part, some of their lives because they'll lose their jobs with results like this, and they never take accountability. That's where I get upset, Charles.
It's understandable, and I do think that the culture of accountability has been late in coming to North America. Because we were all remember, soccer still, we want to call it a minority sport or a niche sport, right? There's always that sense of, well, we soccer people, it's us against the outside world, right? It's we have to protect our own and defend our own against the football folks who hate soccer or the baseball folks who hate soccer or what have you. And I think we're only now, as the stakes really have grown and the game has grown, we're only now ready to name names and call people out. And I think still in refereeing, you look at Peter Walton, who's brought a lot of professionalism, who's brought a lot of experience into his role as the boss of pro, but he's still trying to regulate and evaluate his peers, and I think he's probably feels a little bit of that company man syndrome where he's not naming names, he's not calling people out. They're using examples on they post an example every week of an interpretation of a law, and it's typically talking about what a referee's done correct. In some cases, they'll point out where a referee made a mistake and what they could have done better, but I think there's still that closing of ranks within the referee world. Now let's look at overseas, right? In Italy, Spain, there's a deep stereotype there of referees being incompetent and idiotic.
But not all, Charles, not all.
For sure, but those referees are getting report cards, right? The tabloids, Gazzetta, and all those are putting referee grades every week. They're grading referees. In some ways, there's a little bit too harsh of a spotlight on them, but I think we can move in that direction too. Let's talk about it rather than just just
No,
tell off the referees and call them all bums. But
no, I'm not calling them bums, but you know what? They're picking up a paycheck and they're making decent money. They're making a lot more money than you and I are making. They're making a living. And there's responsibilities by making the money you're making to be accountable. You're accountable where you work. I'm accountable where I work. I get warnings. You get warnings. Why are these refs not getting warnings? And if they are, why are we not told? Why keep it in-house? Why?
I agree with you there, and I do think we can be. I think it's okay, and it's not just referees; it's players, coaches, all around. We can be a little bit more. We can have that discussion publicly and point fingers, and I think that's okay. I think that's a sign of maturity in the game. I would like to see it. I think that probably the reason that would be given is that referee assigners and the ones that are leading these referees and evaluating them are afraid of undermining their authority. I think that's probably how they would answer you there. I don't want to undermine this referee's authority by sort of publicly shaming him. It's certainly, I agree, there's flaws to that answer, but there's this sense of trying to respect the gravitas of the position while still creating accountability. There's a push-pull there, and of course it's anybody's perspective as to whether they get it right.
Charles, great having you on short notice. We really appreciate it. Keep up the great work at soccerwire.com. Tell us a little bit about that site, because I'm new to visiting it as well, and many of our listeners and viewers, I'm sure, would like to know a little bit more about it. Give us a little bit of insight, and where can people follow you on Twitter?
Right, so soccerwire.com is we're a U.S.-based site that's focused on the grassroots and the youth system and the player development pyramid. So we're looking at trying to spot the up-and-comers, celebrate the grassroots game. I'm also a contributor to MLSsoccer.com, the official league website of MLS. You can find me on USSoccerPlayers.com, which is the website of the U.S. National Team Players Association. So my stuff's here, there, and everywhere. I occasionally contribute to 442, which is a great magazine that's recently set up a U.S. branch. Folks should definitely check out 442 USA. And on Twitter, I am at Boehm, at CBOEHM.
Well, outstanding.
Welcome to reach out.
Outstanding, Charles, and it warms my heart to hear you talking about grassroots, because for 15 years, when I started back in sports media here in Toronto, I was the only one talking about grassroots soccer, about academies versus clubs, which is better, which is not better, which is more for the bang for your buck. And I spotlighted, and I still to this day spotlight young youth, boys and girls, coaches that give back so much, because they're forgotten, and they should never be forgotten. So I applaud you for covering the grassroots down in the States, because it's vitally important for the game we love. Charles, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your night, my friend.